But I think
Halo Master Chief Collection coming day one to Switch 2.
Yeah, there we go. That would be a good one.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the State of Nintendo in 2025. This little thing we're doing here at Gamingtrend, just chatting about the industry, what's going on. I am joined by some absolutely incredible guests. Mr. Giovanni Colantonio, Senior Gaming Editor for Digital Trends, alongside Brian Shea, host of All Things Nintendo podcast, formerly of Game Informer. These guys know their stuff. I have to admit that I love Nintendo. I grew up on Nintendo, but I do not have the time to play with Nintendo devices nearly as much as I would like to. So I needed experts, and I've got the experts. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Yeah, can't complain. It's a new year. There's not a lot of games right now, and that's been lovely. I've just taken a break after last year has been great.
I think this might be the most peaceful first part of January I've had in years.
Yeah, I remember last year it was like a Dragon, I think, was immediately, and Prince of Persia and stuff like that, and this
Persona 3 Reload.
Yeah,
right into, and it all led right into Final Fantasy because they got that code out really early. So
yeah, so I feel like it's gonna get busy imminently when February comes around, but God, it's been great to have there's 2 games on the calendar. Great, let's do this every year and month. Just 2 of them.
Yeah. And those 2 games, I was like, here you go, staffers, you guys can do this, you guys are excited for this. Right. I'm just gonna sit here and play Cyberpunk 2077 and enjoy myself. That's something I always forget about, is enjoying myself playing a video game. Drip feed playing a game. I was running around just doing, I swear to God, I've got max street cred and I've barely progressed the story because I've just ran around doing side gigs, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to abandon this train of thought as soon as I get into actually reviewing games again, because I'm gonna need to finish things.
Yeah, I've been getting back into Tetris 99, which is my go-to. I have nothing I'm playing game, and I have a long-term goal. I've beaten it, whatever, but I've never beaten the playlist that unlocks after you've beaten a round. It's the only winners playlist, and it's all bots. There's not enough people have beaten Tetris 99 to have a full playlist, and I've gotten to second place, and that's the closest I've gotten.
Ooh,
it's tough.
There you go.
Yeah, well, I've been trying to chip away at Metaphor. I put 30 hours in as soon as it came out, and then I got distracted with other stuff, and I've been extremely busy. I think I'm busier now than when Game Informer was open, because I've just taking so many odd gigs and jobs here and there. And also expanding out my podcast, so the gaming time that I've had has been so precious at times. And Metaphor, I'm all right, I love this game so much, I need to finally just get through it. And it's great. I'm chipping away 2 hours at a time, and I'm absolutely loving it. But it's man, I'm only 40 hours deep at this point, and I know how long that studio's games can be.
Yeah, that stuff is it's a deep dive. I think probably the worst thing, as someone who is slightly autistic and has a lot of ADHD, I started Cyberpunk, but that meant that at work I was watching lore videos as I was doing work and listening to video essays and all that kind of stuff. Which is exactly what I did earlier this year when the Fallout show hit and when Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out. So I'm sure there will be plenty of other things to grab my interest, especially surrounding Nintendo, which is, we're talking about the state of Nintendo, and, we got to go over how we got here. Recap 2024. By recent standards, I'd say this was arguably one of Nintendo's slowest years. We definitely felt more of the space in between releases. There were some really good but smaller scale spinoffs. We had The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, Princess Peach Showtime, Mario and Luigi Brothership, Super Mario Jamboree. Not their highest scoring games either. It was very easy to tell that this is to fill the gaps. And I don't know if any of you guys played any of these, but did you guys have any opinions on just the first party output?
Yeah, I think I've played pretty much most of Nintendo's first party slate this year, because you kind of can, right? Because they put out a game a month. So it's just 12 Nintendo games through the year, right? I think it actually it's not that it was a slow year necessarily, because I think they did consistently have a game a month, which compared to Xbox or PlayStation is like a pretty impressive like release cadence for exclusives. It's just that they were so niche, right? Where Zelda Echoes of Wisdom was the biggest thing, and even that kind of still felt like a B game. But like if you go back and look at the year, right, it's like the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake, quote unquote, or kind of asset flip, but just that remake. You had like these really weird things like Another Code, right, where that came back and had its like re-release. You had MEO, the Smiling Man, the Famicom Detective Club, which is I think one of the best Switch games. I love that game. I think it's
our
fantastic.
guy actually gave it 100. We actually gave it 100 out of 100.
Man, that game, that's like a real ones know game where it's like a lot of people haven't played it. I keep seeing stuff where it's like IGN's list of like the best Switch games, and it's not on there, and I'm like, oh, you guys just don't know. You just didn't touch it. But yeah, like definitely a lot of niche stuff, and stuff like you forget that there was like a Mario and Donkey Kong remake this year, like just all this bizarre stuff. And I actually kind of liked it, even though it was all over the place and gave us some of like maybe the worst Switch first party exclusives, like Endless Ocean, not very good, stuff like that. But it reminded me of the last year of the 3DS, where I don't know if y'all remember, like the last year where it was like just 3DS, Switch was coming, but they still had to support the 3DS, and they just like were like, hey, who has ideas for games? Whatever, we'll publish anything, right? And you got like Ever Oasis and like weird stuff like that like wasn't for everybody and isn't like regarded as the best Nintendo games or anything, but like have their defenders and are like, that game was secretly really, really good. And that's how I feel about games like MEO, or something like I think Brothership is probably going to have its defenders long term. I don't like it personally, but like I know people who really do. So not a great like mainstream hit year for Nintendo, but I kind of like it as a weird like we're not going to get a year like this again where they're just like anybody make anything, right? Once the Switch 2 drops, we're back in Mario, Zelda, all of our franchises have to do their hits again, all the big games, and I think it'll be a while until we get like the weird experiments. So I savor it while we have it.
Yeah, it almost felt like this. Like, remember when the Wii U like ended its life, and it was like, okay, we are transitioning fully to the Switch. There was like that dead zone where there was nothing coming for the Wii U, but as Giovanni said, they were still supporting the 3DS because that actually had players. Like the Wii U did not have very many players, but the 3DS was, reasonably popular. So they still wanted to support that because the Switch is so popular and, there's one unified platform. They were still able to support it, even though it seems pretty clear to me that all of the A teams have already moved on to developing for Switch 2. So like this is where they were like, hey, like all these B teams that are out there that like develop games for us or want to develop games for us, let's like you said, Gio, like let's see what you got and let's publish some of these games. And like, also they still wanted to capitalize on the increased popularity of some of the characters that are still like getting additional awareness thanks to the popularity of the Super Mario Brothers movie, because we got Princess Peach Showtime to capitalize on Peach's like increased popularity, Mario versus Donkey Kong to play off that rivalry in the movie. You got Luigi's Mansion 2 HD so that they were able to like really like have each of the main characters have a starring role. And then Mario Wonder obviously came out at the tail end of last year. So like all of those fans that were picked up through the Super Mario Brothers movie were also serviced, even though these were all kind of like weird niche offshoot titles.
Yeah. It for me, it's like, it felt like an audition year. It felt like they've had all these B studios for a while or like partners they've been working with who aren't their monolith softs or like their big developers, right? And it felt like, hey, Grezzo, we've only let you do remakes. Or like, I think a couple of other studios were kind of in that. Like Good Feel, I think is the one that did Princess Peach Showtime. And it was like, this is your year. Like you get the big game this year. Show us what you can do. This is our thank you for having you do like remakes and side games for a while. And I think it was interesting to see like who sunk and swam in that swam. I think Grezzo made a really good case with Echoes of Wisdom for like, yeah, that should be a studio that does top-down Zelda games. I think Acquire got its audition with Mario and Luigi Brothership, though they now are maybe owned by Sony. I'm not quite sure because they are part of like the From Software parent group as well.
Oh, right.
So yeah, I think it was like an audition year, and I think like 4 years from now, all of those companies will probably get like a big moment on Switch 2, like once their next games get greenlit. And some of them probably won't, but I think the ones that did a good job, they passed a test, an important test.
Yeah, and it's really nice just seeing that, just the unique quality again that Nintendo has of they didn't just retread a bunch of stuff in this final year, because you could very easily have been like, okay, we've got nothing, how about we remake everything, like, and that become essentially what our year was. Yeah. Which I'm not saying it's not, but at the same time, it's like, for instance, like Luigi's Mansion, that was stuck on an old console, so it makes sense to bring it forward. Very happy to see it moving on. Games like Princess Peach Showtime don't have other games like that for Peach, as well as Echoes of Wisdom. Extremely unique idea. Didn't work in every aspect, but it's an extremely unique idea that it's really cool that is seeing the light of day, which is, of course, why Nintendo is such a great part of this industry, because we get so much unique gaming out of them that we don't see from other companies. Like nobody does it the way Nintendo does it.
And with that like spirit of like, hey, we're just gonna like kind of fill the calendar with like not our like best foot forward, because we're saving that for Switch 2. And the fact that Zelda has all but become annualized at this point, I was so certain this was the year, speaking of games trapped on old consoles, that we were either going to get Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD, or we were going to get A Link Between Worlds finally off of the 3DS, because that is one of the best and most underappreciated Zelda games ever released. And I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised that we got an all new top-down Zelda game, because that's amazing as well.
And an actual Zelda game at that.
Yeah, and actually a Zelda game, because but like I was still like, oh, come on, like we can't even get those ports from like, these other consoles on a year like this. But I get it.
Mm.
It's so funny. I was thinking about this today, the like infamous Jeff Grubb prediction, right? Where it's like, oh, we're getting Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. They're coming. It's going to be on this direct. Then it was not a direct. And it's like, they moved it. It's going to be on the next one. They can just release this anytime. And at some point you have to be like, did you just assume that this was a foregone conclusion? It's like, because I did. I was like, yeah, these games have to come. And it's like, maybe if we predicted enough times, it'll just happen. And I was like, it's such a funny thing that never materialized, because it's so obvious to just put them on the Switch. So
many other Zelda games are on the Switch. Like the Switch has the most Zelda games of any console ever.
Yeah.
And yet we're missing like 3 of the absolute best ones and obvious ports that should have been there like years ago.
They did it just to snub the insiders. They were like, "Oh, you think you know what we're gonna do? We don't have to release these games." And
they've been
sitting in the Disney vault.
Yeah,
essentially.
Don't give them ideas. They would do that. Oh my god,
they would.
They would. Mario 3D All Stars.
Oh my god, yeah, that is in the vault. You're right. Oh my god.
And Mario 35.
Yeah, wasn't there like a Fire Emblem Special Edition game that they like for its anniversary that they also vaulted? It was like I think it was like a re-release of the NES game, of one of the NES games or something. I don't remember. They've been vaulting.
Yeah, I mean, technically the whole, like, what was it, the Virtual Console, that was vaulted a very long time ago.
Yeah, good point.
So, but you never know what's going to happen from here on out, especially considering, they don't have a mainline Zelda game to drop with the Switch 2. So maybe there's, again, other reasons that certain things may be pushed forward. I don't know. Just speaking of different games, third-party support, indie support, like it was there. It just wasn't very. Again, we're very much in the end of that cycle, so it was wasn't a lot of big standouts like we've had in previous years, where the Switch has gotten some of these games that have been like, oh my gosh, this is almost another reason to own a Switch.
We had like Balatro, especially being like the big standout. Like, that's my number 2 game of the year last year, beating out stuff like Astrobot and Metaphor, only losing to Final Fantasy VII for me personally. And Plucky Squire had a lot of promise. It didn't end up panning out as well as I had hoped. What was the other one? Pepper Grinder, was that last year as well?
Yeah, Pepper Grinder was last year.
That was a pretty good one. There were some solid releases, but you're right, it wasn't at the volume that it wasn't.
And they were available a lot of other places too, because like a lot of times we've seen indie games that hit Switch, and it's like when is this coming to my console?
Oh, and
I'll tell you, the one true Switch third-party exclusive that like nobody talked about this year, but it is like probably the best Switch game of the year outside of MEO for me. Like if I was making a list, this might be number 2. Man, Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble.
oh yeah.
Fantastic
yeah.
game. Really a great Monkey Ball game. It like goes back and gets the energy of the GameCube ones in a way that like that series has not done since then. And like it was so slept on, but like man, that was it. That was the Switch third-party game of the year.
I even reviewed that for Game Informer and went to New York to preview it before it came out. And I forgot that released last year, like because it was
Yeah,
like
no,
such an under the radar title.
Yeah. Nobody talked about it. And I don't know if it's just because it was really niche or what, but yeah. I'll also shout out like on good kind of like third party indies that were on other platforms, but like it was great to play them on Switch. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes was my game of the year, and that had like a Switch launch before other consoles. I think it was like PC and Switch originally. So that was one that definitely stood out for me.
Animal
Also,
Well.
Yeah, Animal Well, great Switch.
Also really liked it was again not necessarily standout, but Thank Goodness You're Here. That was a lot of fun to play on the Switch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's tough because like I think about the Switch so differently when it comes to these games now because of the Steam Deck. Like I just play so much on the Steam Deck, and like every time I pick up my Switch and I'm like, oh, like time to download a new game on it, I don't realize how little I actually use it anymore. You know, like it's really just the Nintendo releases, and then like I played Balatro on it, so that's on there, and that was all my hours this year. But like a lot of these other games I would have been playing on Switch, and just and it's kind of all moved to Steam Deck, and it makes me forget that they're on Switch to begin with. And when you look at the Switch eShop store to try and be like, well, what's new just for Switch? Impossible to navigate. So that makes it difficult too.
Yeah, well, and one other one that I wanted to shout out is a game that I think a lot of people skipped because we got 3 TMNT games in 2024, one of which was abysmal, one of which was pretty good, and one of which was actually very good. And the one that I'm referencing is TMNT Splintered Fate, which was like kind of like a Hades style game that was exclusive to Apple Arcade for the longest time. And it also came to Switch in 2024, and I had a great time with that game.
Yeah, that's a really good one. It has been nice that Switch has become the like, hey, our Apple Arcade contract is up. We can bring a game somewhere.
Oh,
Can we just
Fantasian.
put it on Switch. Yeah, Fantasian, like one of my favorite RPGs of like this decade.
Yep, happening with Hello Kitty Island Adventure, which is previewed that at Summer Game Fest, and it was oddly awesome.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah. So it's like, it's really nice to see that getting another life on the Switch, and we'll be coming to some other platforms. But yeah, speaking on your Steam Deck call out, like part of the fun with that one is the fact that I buy it one place and I can play it on my PC and on the go. So that definitely has changed. Obviously you can connect your Switch to the TV, so it works, but like, there's a difference when I'm at my computer a whole lot. It's like, it makes it a lot easier for me to just navigate Steam. And as you've said, Steam is very easy to navigate.
Yeah.
So it does changes a little bit of things.
Nintendo really could learn a lesson from like literally every other digital storefront and like figure out how to organize that thing better. And also make it not chug like you are like trying to run like The Witcher 3 at max graphics on like a PC from 2001.
It's
or on a Switch.
That's like the only thing I actually need from Switch 2. Like if I don't know if we're talking about our wish list for it at some point, but like just have it load menus at a speed that's normal. That'd be great. That's all I really want.
But funny enough, we will get to that.
All right, perfect.
Obviously, with the Switch, the hardware is pretty much in the same vein that it's been. It's still a great seller, but obviously it's trending downwards. But the good news was they did finally pass PS2, which was, of course, what they were aiming for. That was it's pretty obvious that that's part of why they kept. Not just we want to have stock with the Switch 2 to be able to sell a bunch of them at launch, but also, hey, we have a chance to beat the best-selling console of all time.
Well, it was only in the US that they beat it, right? It wasn't overall. Okay, so they still have a little bit of ways to go.
They did. They managed to get it at least there. So like, you'll take the win at least.
For sure.
But yeah, hardware. It's pretty obvious that it's just they're just running out of customers. That's really the easiest way to put it. You've sold so many. The market has not exactly exploded in terms of new gamers. So
yeah, there's not a lot of people who are like, a new Endless Ocean game? I didn't have a Switch before, but now it's time to jump on this one.
Yeah, and you've already upgraded people to OLEDs who are going to upgrade to OLEDs at this point. Like either my old Switch is dead and I'm a new customer, or I've already upgraded and there's no point in it. So hardware is just not surprising, which of course brings us to 2025 and the big stuff, which is the Switch 2. It has to be this year. There's especially after what's funny is I wrote that sentence like, yeah, it's about to become another Zelda remake. We're not gonna release it this year just to spite all of you. At this point, it has to come out. It really has to. I don't know if is it going to be Switch 2? Like I want Super Switch so bad.
So I have a thought on that. So I actually put this out on Blue Sky last night because I saw the discourse was discoursing, and I would have liked Super Switch as well. However, Nintendo kind of shot themselves in the foot with this one because they already have the established convention that when they put out like an iterative update to the 3DS, they called it the new 3DS. And so putting a word in front of it makes it seem less impactful because they're their own established conventions. And then you can't do something like, Switch Deluxe or Switch XL because that's also ruined by their own pre-established conventions. So the more I've thought about it, I tried to think of any other name that could make sense that wouldn't be a huge risk. The way that they thought they were trying to get so cute with the Wii U because, hey, it's Wii and it's you, and you get to play it together or by yourself. And it's a single player game and it's a multiplayer game that you can play on this. And we saw what it was. We saw Jimmy Fallon with Reggie Fils-Aimé go like, hey, it's a new controller for the Wii. You got to check this pad out. And then like he came back from commercial and very clearly Reggie had leaned in and been like, hey, it's actually an all new console, so please get that right. Because he came back from commercial, he's like, oh, my mistake. So I think that Nintendo has kind of been scared away from kind of the cutesy naming conventions, and they're seeing how successful and how powerful the Switch name has become. And I think that they would be making a huge risk to name it Super Switch because of that new 3DS naming convention being an iterative update instead of an all new update, or getting too cutesy with something on the end to make it sound like, oh, it's Switch, but it's another model of the Switch. I think they just got to go with Switch 2 because that's the only logical name I can think of.
I agree. Like, I think for a long time, Nintendo was the console name, right? Like, so it made sense for the NES and the Super Nintendo and the Nintendo 64. Like, that was their PlayStation, was the word Nintendo. And I think they've kind of been searching, I think, for a while to like find something that could replace that and not just be Nintendo. And I think they finally hit it with the Switch, right? Like, I think this is the point in Nintendo's life where it's like, this is our PlayStation brand, right? This is the thing we're going to iterate on. Switch 2, Switch 3, Switch 4, whatever. Which is like a little bit sad to me because it feels like the death of the fun console. And I keep thinking about this with like the leaks that keep coming out of like, oh, it's just another Switch, and it's like not like a new bright toy-like device. And like from what we've seen from leaks, like it doesn't really look like it's a colorful.
You mean to tell me that trailer I saw where the smell was coming out of the Joy-Con is not true?
I have not seen that one, but I'm sad to say that I don't think that's true. Yeah, I'll save this thought for the reveal, I guess. But like, if it is just kind of Switch 2, there's a part of me that's like, oh man, that's like the end of the GameCube era, right? Of like, what is the gimmick of this console that makes it iconic? It's like they hit on the perfect thing, and it feels hard to really deviate from that at this point, especially because like, now Steam Deck and all these portable PCs are becoming a thing, and it's kind of like, hey, we got to continue on this trend because we've hit on something. So I do think it'll be Switch 2. I think this will be kind of their PS2 moment where it's like, this is our brand. Our console brand is no longer Nintendo. Like, it is the Switch.
And they've had those brands in the past, right? Because like, Game Boy had Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. and then eventually they switched over to DS and had the 3DS after that, and then they thought they had it with Wii going into Wii U, and very clearly they did not, or the confusion had really set in. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Gio. I think that the Switch is going to be kind of like their console line for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Yep. That makes sense. And now I'm starting to get blown away in my head because I haven't played on a 3DS in a long time, and thinking about the fact that I used to play video games in a 3D, like something that's literally was doing like 3D on the screen. Like, man, what a shift in generation we have seen.
Nothing has prepared me in my life more for being nearsighted later in life than trying to use the 3D on the 3DS and being like, I can't quite get it right. It's kind of fuzzy. I can't really look at this. It's like, oh, now I get it. I was prepared for this.
Like there's a drawer upstairs somewhere, and I know it has my Zelda 3DS in there. I'm gonna have to pull it out just to remember the times.
Yeah, I've got my Majora's Mask 3DS. It's a great one.
So obviously with a new Switch comes a lot of new internals because you can't just stick with the same thing. There's been a lot of different rumors. I don't know what you guys have read up on. You guys may have even seen more than I have when it comes to it. There's a lot of different stuff with the processor, with the RAM, all the different kind of things that they're putting into this thing. Obviously, there's no way this thing contends with PS5 and Xbox Series X. It's just, that's not what Nintendo's trying to do. But what levels do you guys think it's going to be looking at? Like, what do you expect from the internals, like that we're starting to see, or even just your experience with Nintendo in general?
I expect it to be not much more than a PS4. Like, I expect this to get caught up with the last generation of consoles, which is going to like bum people out. And I feel like anything they do is going to bum people out because like it's just not going to be as powerful as a Steam Deck. Like that's the reality of it. I think it'll be behind. But I will say, like, how powerful does it need to be? And I know that people get mad when you say things like this, right? Because they're like, no, we need the most power. But it's like I always say that, like, at the end of the day, Nintendo designs their games around the fact that they are not a graphical powerhouse company, right? Like, you can have the most powerful company or most powerful console in the world. It can run like a PS5. Kirby's still going to look like Kirby, right? Like the only thing that's going to change with more power is like maybe you'll see a little less artifacting around this round sphere with no detail. Because Nintendo's just been really good at that. And people always kind of reference like, oh, but these Pokemon games look terrible on Switch, and like, we need more power for that. But that was an issue with like Game Freak not optimizing for the Switch well. There are plenty of games.
Just Game Freak.
Yeah, that's just Game Freak. Like, there are plenty of games that look perfectly great on Switch, like fantastic, and take advantage of it. So I'm not really expecting it to be more powerful than a PS4, but I'm expecting it to like use that tech to its advantage in a way that is like uniquely Nintendo, and that we'll see games that like are able to get more illustrative, right? Something like Mario and Luigi Brothership, where you had that style that felt more expressive and cartoony. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I think you'll see with more power, less than like, oh, now Mario's realistic and he has a pistol. Like, I think people got to check their expectations about stuff like that.
And people forget that on the PS4 ran Red Dead Redemption 2.
It runs PS5 games. Like Ragnarok is like on PS4, right? Yeah.
Horizon Forbidden West.
Yeah. Great looking games.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I'll approach this from a different angle. My biggest want on the Switch too would be an SSD, because that makes the experience so much better. Like we used to joke at Game Informer that Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown has one Switch exclusive feature, and that is loading screens. And it would be so nice to not have to do that. It would be great to be able to have, like, SSDs have become so much more affordable, so much smaller than they were in 2017. Like, it's got to be something that they can implement into that without jacking up the cost the way it would have 8 years ago. And or making the form factor way too thick, like it would have maybe 8 years ago.
I hope it's at least like a little bit more of a modular console. I think that's maybe one of my hopes for it when it comes to like the internals of it. Like, I think I feel like consoles have to evolve in this way, and I think like the PS5 has started to kind of get at this, and the PS5 Pro, where like there's a little bit of modularity to it, right? Where like the disk drive you can remove off. They figured out how to do that so that you can like customize the thing and add that. I want to see that more in consoles, and I think this is an area where for sure, like I think it would be great if like even if it doesn't ship with one, just like give me a spot where I could put one in very easily. Yeah, and I think that would be great.
I'd like to see it as a part of the dock.
Sure, yeah.
I wrote an article back, I think it was like 2011, and it was talking. I used to do like things like, hey, trends that I could see like being expanded upon in the future of gaming, and like I accurately predicted the season pass, the rise of the season pass back in that era. And another one that I predicted was that we would see the return of things like the expansion pack from the N64, which is what you're getting at, Gio, of like these modular things where it's like, oh, I need more power to play this game. Let me plug this in. And like, I don't know if that's what we're getting on Switch 2, but that would be something that I think would make a lot of sense to like get extra oomph into your games, especially if like the Switch 2 is going to be a lot less powerful than anything that Microsoft or Sony are throwing out there.
Yeah, going to the leaks that have come out recently. So obviously this week there was, that we're recording this, there was the big Genki leak where the third-party accessory manufacturer who was like, we're just going to reveal all of our stuff. And then like IGN interviewed them and they were like, we didn't think this was secret. We thought that like everybody knew this at this point. But they had like a page that went up.
That's plausible deniability is what they're going for.
It was a really funny way to get out of it. They were like, we all know though, right? They had like a video on their website because they have like a pre-order page for their Switch 2 products where they have their whole like mock-up. And one thing that was really cool on it, and I don't think it's a feature of the Switch 2, I think it's a feature of like one of their accessories that's on the Switch 2. But there's this part in the video where like there are these slots on the side of the console where you can put on grips, like different shape grips for it. And I was like, man, just that's the kind of thing that I just want built into a console, not like from a manufacturer, right? Like put a little groove back there that like you don't ship with anything, but you just kind of like allow people to mess with that. And I think that Nintendo used to do this a little bit. In the GameCube era, there was that like weird underside of the GameCube that was such a mystery. And it was like, what is any of this for? And it was kind of like, anybody who wants to figure out an accessory to throw under that sucker, go for it, and that's how you got like the Game Boy player and like all of these weird things you could drop on the bottom of it. I would love to see that come back. It doesn't necessarily seem like that's going to happen, and it seems like maybe some of these manufacturers are like figuring out how to do it themselves, but like, yeah, man, I would love for someone to crack that on a console. It's overdue.
Yeah, I would like to. I think the biggest thing I want to see is like what can you do dock wise? Like, do you guys think there's any credence to the possibility of some almost an expansion pack type dock, in the sense that Nintendo might be making it so that if you run it docked, you can get more out of the Switch, or obviously you're going to get a little bit out of it just in general from docking it. But do you guys think that Nintendo might look into giving it a boost that way?
I could see it potentially being a 4K dock. I'd be surprised if it wasn't at this point, considering that was like the number one wish list thing for a lot of people. I also heard like rumors that are probably completely unsubstantiated, but I think are interesting to talk about anyways, about like maybe they're going to use AI upscaling, which is obviously hot new tech. I don't know if Nintendo is like tuned in enough to the world to be using that yet. I feel like that's something you'll see in 2 generations when they're like, oh, that's an idea that everyone has been doing for 20 years. But that could be a way to pull it off too, right? Where like that dock has a little bit of that power in it to get you there. I do think that like stuff like AI upscaling is probably what we're going to see a lot of companies do going forward. And part of me just hopes that Nintendo pulls the trigger on it here, because it's kind of like it's going to be like 8 years until they have another chance at this, unless they do an upgrade.
And it's free frames. It really is free frames if you've got the right processor in place. Like,
yeah,
they should use that on their eShop.
AI upscale the eShop is a really good idea.
That seems like something you'd actually see as a feature on the package. AI upscale the eShop.
Only on the eShop, not for games, just to get that sucker to load. It's great.
Yep. Oh, geez. I mean, I don't worry as much about the games, because we literally had Tears of the Kingdom running on what felt like a potato at the point in time it was. So, like, they know what they're doing, especially on the first party side, and making games work. It's just, what can you do to accentuate that? How can you make it better? Like, how can you make it so that I choose to pull out that when I'm at home? Because that's probably the biggest thing, is I don't almost ever use my Switch when I'm at home. It's always on the go because it's a convenience thing rather than okay, I'm home, I'd rather play on the more powerful system that I've got at home. Yeah. Do you I guess we kind of already answered this. We expect more of a sequel to the Switch. Not necessarily the sad thing, like you said, the death of the fun console. Like, it feels like we always got something fresh and new. Like, is there any feature you think they'll figure out? Or
so the thing that I'm interested in right now is a lot of the leaked mock-ups and whatnot have an extra button. There's a C button that's like underneath the home button. It's like this mysterious button. Nobody knows what it's for. I'm hoping that there's some feature that is tied to that. And there's been some like ridiculous leaks about that. I don't know if y'all saw the video.
I'm excited because I have not heard what these leaks could possibly do. So spill the tea.
There was one that I've been reading. It's like a prevailing theory about this button, and someone was like, "I know I'm an insider, and I know the information." And it's like the silliest.
His uncle works at Nintendo.
Yeah, truly the most uncle works at Nintendo thing. They were like, it's tied to an app called VidMio, like MIIEO, like a Vimeo pun, but with me, where they're like, it's like a social media app built in. It's like the return of Street Pass, where you can post gameplay clips and like
it's Nintendo TikTok.
Yeah, no, they literally said like it has vertical video scrolling and all this stuff, and like stuff that does not make any sense at all, because that's the point that we're at for like the leak mania for this. But like, I do kind of hope to see a return of some social feature that is not called VidMio, but perhaps something else.
Because I would not be surprised. That name sounds thoroughly Nintendo.
It's so, I don't know, even for Nintendo, like to make a Vimeo pun, that just doesn't seem. I mean, I know it's a video pun, but like it makes me think of Vimeo. I would like to see something like Street Pass return, because I think that was the best feature of the
Street Pass was so cool.
Yeah, like if
I sold customers games at GameStop based on the fact that we could Street Pass.
Yeah, totally. It was a social water cooler thing, and Nintendo previously used to be good for like a stretch there at figuring out like the water cooler software, right? The Wii had so many of these like weird apps, like Everybody Votes and stuff like that. If anything, like, don't change the system much, but give me stuff like that. Like, give me better ways to connect with people, because the Switch is like a lonely experience, despite feeling like a like, oh, you can bring it anywhere, and it's like, so portable, and you can share it with people. It feels lonely because it doesn't have as robust a social hub as any other platform. So I'd love to see that come back. Like, give me something like Miiverse, give me a social sharing feature, especially like social media is dead, and no gaming platform has like a share to social media button anymore, but they all have like screenshot sharing tools. So like, give me a way to do it within the Switch. Like, that's a feature that I think could be like, you don't need to change the hardware to still have an innovation there.
I know one thing I saw was somebody holding the Joy-Con like on its side like a mouse, like that apparently there's like a mouse, like there's a reader that you could move it around and click and stuff. That they're just setting up so we can play Counter-Strike and Valorant on our Switches.
I went to Mario Paint. Personally,
somebody pitched that to me today too, and I was like, yeah, I totally forgot about that. The optical sensor that people are seeing on the Joy-Con could be like a genuine innovation there. Though they kind of were beaten to the punch on that, because the Lenovo Legion Go has like kind of the same thing. It has like a mouse option, like a sensor on the bottom. So they were kind of beaten at their game, but I would love that, just because. Yeah, like a shooter or like a strategy game you could actually do on Switch and get like that mouse control. And I think that would be great, though it would probably force developers to figure out like different control schemes for like, well, you have a mouse, but not a keyboard. Like, what does that mean?
By the way, have either of you played with a Lenovo Legion Go?
Yes.
I haven't.
How is the form factor of that? Because reading from the people who did get their hands on the CES dummy kit from Genki, they compared it to that handheld unit, was the Lenovo Legion Go. So like, what's the sizing like on that? Because I've not touched one of those.
So the Legion Go itself, the size of it's fine. I mean, it is bulky. The problem with the Legion Go is less like the form factor of the console and more like the form factor of their Joy-Con equivalents. So the Legion Go has controllers that can snap off of it. It's very much like a Switch in that regard, but they're like very bulky. They're like triangles. Like it's like holding like pieces of wood. It's crazy. So if the size of it is the Legion Go, I think that's manageable. I think it just still needs to have like the thinness of a Switch, because that's where a lot of these portable PCs go wrong. Like, I think you can have a screen that's as big as you want. It's really like, oh, we packed this thing with a bunch of stuff and need to make it this wide, where I think you start to get bulky. But I don't, if it's like screen size like that, I don't think there's any problem with that, as long as the rest of the console is like light to match and the controllers are still kind of like, oh, these are small and comfy.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just concerned when I heard that, because I'm like, I have a Steam Deck. I don't have a Legion Go, but like, I would not want my Switch to be anywhere near the size of my Steam Deck.
Yeah, no. I imagine it'll be big but not heavy. That's my hope, at least. Like, and I think that
dummy model, it looks like it.
Yeah,
it looks like it's pretty thin.
Yeah,
it looks like a Switch that maybe has a little bit bigger of a screen. To me, is essentially what I've seen so far.
The one thing that I'm really like scared about is the display, because like I'm so used to my OLED now, and like that thing's not running an OLED screen from everything we've heard, and I'm like, it better be a good LCD screen, or LED screen.
Do you think there's any chance we end up with two models, one that's an OLED and one that's a regular? Or do you think they're just gonna, or do you think they're gonna nickel and dime us like Nintendo does and make us pay for one like 2 years later?
I mean, I would splurge on the nicest model that they put out at launch. Like, I'm gonna get one at launch no matter what. So it's like kind of like the Wii U. It's like when they put out that, they had like the Pro model and the base model, and I was like, oh well, I want those sweet 32 gigabytes of memory. And so I paid the extra, like, what was it, $120, and got like Nintendo Land and like the 32 gigabyte internal hard drive, and it was black instead of white. So that was the Wii U that I had for the entire life cycle. And it's like, if they did the same thing where it was like $150 or $200 more for the Switch 2 OLED, I would do that easily.
Yeah. I think most people would.
It is one of those where it's like, I feel like it's nickel and diming. Like, you already know that people love the OLED. Like, it would be really nice if we could get both of these models to launch at the same time.
But, because I'm not going to wait 2 years for the OLED model to hit. And then, like, if I have a Switch 2 and it runs just fine, like, I'm not going to drop another like $450 or whatever this ends up costing to upgrade just the screen of the Switch if it's, running fine still. Like, my Switch launch model is on its last leg, so I'm like dying for the Switch 2 so I can upgrade that, because like I'm not going to get an OLED right now because like we're so close. I've been waiting. This is the only reason I didn't get an OLED when it first came out, was because there were all these rumors swirling about the Switch Pro, and that never happened. So I've just held out this long that I might as well just wait for the Switch 2 at this point.
Yeah, they finally got me with the Tears of the Kingdom Switch. Finally got me with an OLED. So
it's a
great screen. Once you see it, you don't want to go back. It's ignorance is bliss if you haven't picked one up.
100%. Backwards compatibility. This is going to be a big thing. We already know that from everything we've heard, it's backwards compatible. Do you all feel like it's going to be a very simple backwards compatible? I would assume it's going to be plug and play in terms of just inserting your chips in and everything.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Definitely, I think they'll probably use the same cartridges and everything to keep it simple. What I'd be curious about is if everything that's on your like Switch account carries over. So it's like, oh, I have Balatro on my Switch. I own it on the Switch too. I'd be curious to see if that is how deep they're going with backwards compatibility, and I think they should. I think like any console should at this point be like.
We're at this point.
Yeah, just like whatever your library is. I know that's not like actually possible because like these games have to release, but like if Balatro releases on Switch 2, like, and I own it, I want it to be tied to my account. And like everything is account based on Nintendo now, so they have the framework to do this maybe. But I feel like that's not going to happen, and it's more just going to be like, yeah, the cartridges work. Throw them in. I hope you own them. That way.
If digital backwards compatibility is not a thing, I might end my podcast because I'll be so mad at Nintendo. I own like 2 Switch cartridges and then 650 games on the eShop.
I'm willing to bet it's going to be similar to the current system in the sense of you put them close to each other, you do that little transfer thing and move your account over essentially. So you lose your account on your other Switch essentially.
Yeah, I guess I would just be curious to see like, do all the games, if your game is on the Switch eShop, is it on the Switch 2 eShop at launch, right? Is it just like same store pretty much, like there's no optimization needed? And I feel like that's something that we don't know. It's like, yeah, it's backwards compatible, but like when you think about it, that doesn't mean anything yet until they confirm what kind of backwards compatibility. It's a weird like mystery there.
Do you feel like games are going to see performance boosts on the Switch 2? Like PS4 version of Cyberpunk, obviously, yes, it was garbage, but at the same point, it ran where it did not run on the PS4.
I don't expect much, only because I don't think the power is going to be a significant enough boost to like make that matter. But I hope to be surprised on that. It would be great. There are certain games that like kind of run like trash that, like even Echoes of Wisdom like doesn't run super well. And like that could use just a tiny boost that I think would get it over the edge. But I don't know. Like Nintendo's not the kind of company that has done that previously. Anything it would do here would kind of be unprecedented. So I want to say no, just because in my mind, I'm still living in this world of Nintendo that's like, we are so behind on any tech that like anything you think that is obvious, we don't do. But I really hope to be surprised. I really do.
Yeah. Hopefully there'll be enough to brute force is the hope.
Yeah.
There were those reports out of Gamescom 2023 that the thing that they were showing behind closed doors on the Switch 2 was Breath of the Wild running at 60 frames per second. So here is hoping that is like what we get. It's just like, okay, well, these games just run a little bit better than they did. Like, it's not like, oh, suddenly Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have 4K assets and all that stuff. But like, Xbox has been doing frame rate boosts for their backwards compatible games for years now. I would imagine Nintendo could look at that and be like, oh, that would be nice if like Scarlet and Violet actually ran on our hardware and like it if you went out into the middle of the water and it suddenly was a slideshow. Like that would be nice if you could actually swim in that game and not bring our hardware to its absolute knees, seeing as how that is the mainline Pokemon game that we are still promoting to this day.
I agree, though. I think that's where you're going to run into things where you realize, like, oh, some of these games are just built bad. Like, this is not an issue with the Switch internals. Like, for all of these games, like, I don't think there's any amount of boosting you can do that can save like any of Game Freak's Pokemon games. Like, it's like, oh, you're going to get more frames. Cool. It's going to run at 12 frames a second instead of 5. Like, great. That's a great.
I'll take
boost.
it.
Yeah. Any frames you can get in that game,
Yeah. I mean, it's frustrating in that regard, but also like Xbox didn't do it on like, hey, every game is just suddenly going to run better. They did it on a case by case basis. Like I remember like they would make an announcement like, okay, well, Sonic Generations is now frame rate boosted. And then you play it and you're like, oh my God, this is like a brand new game now because it runs at 60 frames per second instead of like the 30 that we got on Xbox 360.
Yeah.
Agreed. So I guess the big elephant in the room, pricing. How good or bad do you think this is going to be? Because Nintendo doesn't take losses on their hardware. We all know this. Like they refuse to.
Ooh, I'm going to say $350 for a base model, $450 for like an upgraded version. If they do that, and if they don't do an upgraded like split models, split SKUs, I'm just going to say $400 flat.
Yeah, I was going to say 400. I think that like. That Nintendo is very competitive in pricing, and like 400 is competitive, like it just is at this point. Like when a PS5 Pro is $700, like 400 doesn't feel like a lot anymore. The thing that's the X factor in this is tariffs. If the newly proposed tariffs go through, it's unclear at the moment if that'll affect Nintendo. A lot of their manufacturing right now happens in Vietnam, I want to say. So like I think they're safe if that's the case. But we don't know. Like, we don't know where the Switch 2 is really being manufactured right now. We don't know if that's going to be a problem. Part of me has been wondering if the reason that they haven't revealed this thing yet, despite the fact that it has leaked every which way to Sunday, is because they're kind of waiting to see, like, is someone going to get in office day one and change the tariffs? And that's going to, like, mess with us. But I do think, like, 350, 400 sounds like the sweet spot to me. I would be shocked if it's 300. Like anything lower than 350, I think is probably unrealistic at this point.
Yeah, and that's why I went with, because I would be shocked if it was 300, but I would also be shocked if they went all the way up to 500, which is why I kind of was like, yeah, 400 seems like the sweet spot, but if they have the split skew approach, 400 to 450 isn't a big enough leap to like, make it so that there's a meaningful difference between those models. So that's why I think it would go 350, 450, and if there's only one, it would go 400 right in the middle.
It's so interesting too, because like they've lost leverage when it comes to pricing, because with the Switch, like they could price it whatever they wanted because they were the only console that was the Switch, so like they could have sold that thing for 400 at the time and people still would have bought it because it was like, there is nothing like this. It is a one of kind product. Now they're fighting against the Steam Deck and the MSI Claw and the Asus ROG Ally and like all of these handhelds that are more powerful than a Switch 2 is going to be, just like flat out, most likely all more powerful than a Switch 2. And so it's like, you have to be competitive. Like you cannot run that thing for $500 because you can get a better console for $500 that does everything that the Switch 2 does except play Nintendo games. But if you're a thief, or whatever, then you're going to be able to find a way to play them on the Steam Deck. So like, yeah, I think it has to be 400 or lower. I think realistically, I'm hoping for 350, but I think they could squeak out 400 and still get away with it. If it goes above that, I think that's when you get into dangerous territory.
Yeah, I was sitting at 400 was my thought for the system. Now, if they did for some reason decide, let's do an OLED model, I could see them eking it up to 470, like 469.99, because the current OLED is 360 or 350 or whatnot. So like, if all you're doing is switching the screen, I could see them being willing to put it at that, because that still keeps it under that $500. So again, we'll see how. I hate to say greedy, because I've never felt like Nintendo was greedy, because they always give you a lot for what you put in.
Except for they never put their first party games on sale. It's like, wow, Tears of the Kingdom's on sale.
Yeah,
it's $65.99 instead of $70.
It's the classic hard drive article, right? That's like Nintendo trying to decide if they can survive selling Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze for $40.
I cannot tell you how upset I was watching the announcement of Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze and seeing the price. You're charging $10 more than it cost on the Wii U, and all we get is a random extra Kong that makes the game easier. Like, that's it.
Wild stuff. Yeah, that's
we got a lot more out of that, because that became a meme. So we not only got an extra character, we got a meme out of that, so that's well worth it.
You've got your head in the right place, Brian. That's right.
But then depending on how well the meme does, they might cease and desist and sue you into oblivion. So
hey, extra revenue for them.
Yeah, that's great. This is a great model.
This is how they recoup having lower priced consoles.
We're gonna make people want to make jokes about us, and then we're gonna sue them for a lot of money. Yeah. We got this.
This is why they don't sell their hardware at losses.
Yeah.
Yep. There's one time that I remember that they sold it at a loss. It was the Wii U, and it was because you could buy a game and they made their money back, because obviously you would buy a game.
Yeah.
So, speaking of games, obviously this thing has to have video games on it, or else it ain't gonna go that far. We watched the Wii U launch with 13 titles at launch, and it was pretty bad. Nintendo did not repeat that mistake with the Switch. It had a bevy of titles right out that year. It isn't going to be as strong, though, considering we don't have Breath of the Wild starting. Like, there's not that system seller game, at least that we know of, obviously. So we've got a couple of different things to think on. Donkey Kong Country HD and Xenoblade Chronicles X. My guess, that's pretty much the end of our first party Switch, correct? I'm sure you guys feel like that's going to be the end of the line.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if they have a February game.
Dedicated, should I say.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if there's a February game in the pipe, because Nintendo does like to do one game every month, and we don't know what their February thing is. If there is something, I imagine it's small, right? Like even like a DLC or something like that. But yeah, I think it's probably safe to assume those are probably the last ones. Maybe just one small thing in between.
Endless Ocean Luminous 2.
they could squeak out a sequel of that real easy because there's not much going on in that one.
Here's a deep track for you: a Codename Steam remake.
Whoa.
Oh my god! Yes.
Or Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD.
There we go.
You're right.
There it is.
They could
It's
just
the
drop that in
perfect
February.
place.
Yeah, or like Prime
on
2
Valentine's Day as
right?
a love letter to us.
Yeah, I could see them dropping Prime 2 and Prime 3 in the same way that they dropped like Pikmin 2 and or 1 and 2 before 4 came out. I could see them just dropping those to be like, hey, Metroid Prime 4 is coming this year. We want to make sure that all the Metroid Prime games are on one console before it comes out. Like that could be the February game.
I could see it.
Now, speaking of Prime, is Prime 4 going to be a launch title?
I don't
Not
think
launch
so.
window, but a launch title.
I don't think so. I think that's going to be their holiday release. And I think that we get this Switch 2 before the holidays.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on this. I think like everyone keeps assuming that Prime 4 will be the launch title because they're like, oh, that's the
one we know about.
But like, man, you got to look back at how much Metroid games have sold in the past because it is not much. These are not system selling games. They are enthusiast Nintendo hardcore fan games. Like, if it is the launch title for Switch, it is the B title, right? It is like your 1-2 Switch equivalent, like to Breath of the Wild. I imagine that it'll be like a summer release game, in that like Splatoon 2 spot when the first Switch released. Your kind of like enthusiast series that people like, that hopefully gets a big lift from being on the Switch. But yeah, I think they have much bigger guns planned for launch. I don't think Metroid Prime is big enough unless it's a very powerful game and they want to show off like the graphical capabilities of the system. But I mean, they've been building it on Switch this entire time, so I don't imagine it is.
Now, do you expect that we're going to have a lot of cross-gen titles for the Switch right out the gates, like for the first year? Because that's something that didn't exist for the original Switch.
Yeah, I think so. I think Prime 4 will be cross-gen. I think Pokemon ZA will be cross-gen. I imagine like a couple of games, but I don't think Nintendo will do it for as long as like Sony and Microsoft did. Granted, a lot of people own a Switch, and a lot of people are still going to be active Switch users for a long time. And these are Nintendo games, so how hard is it to get your new Kirby game running on the old Switch? But I imagine that it'll only be like 2 years of crossover, selectively. It's hard for me to picture them like the dollars and cents of it is just like you want people to move to the new console. Like it doesn't matter. People are still playing the old Switch. You need to avoid the problem of the Wii U. You need this to feel like a new console and not like an optional upgrade. And I think the way you do that is by forcing the games, which stinks because, people shouldn't have to upgrade, but like that's the business of it.
Yeah, and Nintendo does not have a long and deep history of first party games at the very least being cross generation. Like, obviously Breath of the Wild was one example where it was on Wii U and Switch, but it was announced for Wii U and it was just delayed for so long that they were like, oh, we should put it on our new system that's probably not going to be a flop. And they did the same thing with Twilight Princess. It was just delayed for so long that they were like, well, we already announced it for GameCube, but what if we put motion controls on it and put it on Wii as well? So I don't think I would be very surprised if, the next Mario game or even like the next Mario Kart game was a cross-gen title, because like they already have a great Mario Kart game on Switch. They already have several Mario games on Switch. So I think that if there is something that like this already exists on the Switch in some form, they're not going to do that past like the first several months.
Agreed.
Makes sense. Jumping actually a little bit ahead, considering you brought up Pokemon Legends, do you feel like it's going to have enough time to bake properly for the Switch 2? Like, obviously, you got a little bit more power to work with, so it does help some. And they have had a little extra time.
The problem is that power is not the problem with Pokemon games. And I think that's like kind of the misconception that comes up with it. The problem with like Game Freak's Pokemon games has been that like they are built off of like the 3DS framework, right? Like those are games that were not built with the Switch in mind. So it completely depends. I think like if when they started that project, were like, we are building from the ground up what a
New
Pokemon
engine.
game. yeah, like what a Pokemon game looks like on a new console, it is, this is entirely new, then yes. How close this is to Arceus, because Arceus, I feel like was not that long ago, right? It was like what 20.
2022.
Yeah, like it's still pretty new, and it makes me feel like they like rushed this thing out. Um, maybe it'll run a little bit better, and maybe they optimized it a little bit better. But I would expect that like we won't see the like switch to we're sorry we fixed it Pokemon game until like whatever's after that, presumably the next like mainline game or maybe the next remake they do.
I have seen reports because when I got to visit Game Freak back in 2019, when Game Informer sent me there for the Pokemon Sword and Shield cover story.
Hmm.
And one of the things that like frustrated me so much about talking with them, and I had a great time there, and like I was, it was awesome to be in where they make the Pokemon games, which is one of my favorite franchises. But they are an incredibly small team. Like I think I want to say like they were like, oh yeah, we like doubled in size when it was decided that we were going to make console games instead of handheld games because there's no more dedicated handheld. So we had to. We bumped up to 100 people, and it was just like, what?
Wow.
And then,
Holy
but I have
crap.
seen reports since Scarlet and Violet that they have been boosting their staff numbers substantially. I think that was their wake up call that like this cannot continue. And like I would imagine Nintendo had a pretty stern conversation with them, like, hey, like Pokemon is like one of our top franchises. You guys need to take this seriously. Because remember, even Nintendo's like Twitter account put out like an apology saying like this is not up to our standards, which they never do. So like there was such
because everything's
backlash.
usually up to their standards behind closed doors. They're yelling at people.
Right. Yeah, so the fact that they even had to address it is probably like a point of great shame for Nintendo.
Totally.
And I have a feeling that they were like, hey, this is like one of our top 3 most popular franchises. You guys have got to like figure this out. And I think that, that's probably something that Game Freak has been doing, if I had to guess.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you that I think that too much was seen in in those last entries. There's too much hubbub around it. So Nintendo's going to do something. They tend to be very high on their whole quality control compared to a lot of companies.
Yeah, and
so
they've been so like successful with Pokemon. Like it's the highest grossing entertainment franchise on the freaking planet. And like they make more than Marvel, they make more than Disney, like all that stuff. Pokemon is like higher than all of these other franchises in terms of money they earn. I know a lot of that's like Pokemon Go and like the trading cards and all that stuff. But like at its core is Game Freak's titles that they put out. Like that is what it's all built around. And they can't make it so that like this game runs well. This game that looks like a up-resed PS2 game runs well on modern hardware. That's a problem, and they need to address that. And they need to add more animations to these characters. They need to make it so the character models look presentable on a modern console. And I have a lot of thoughts on what Pokemon needs to do. And first and foremost, they need to get their games to run properly.
Maybe they'll drop it right before the Switch 2. It'll be like, oh, the last Switch game is this, and it'll like run like trash, and then they'll be like, here's the first new Pokemon game for Switch 2, and it'll look amazing, and people will be like, oh, I have to buy this console. Like maybe it's a sacrificial lamb,
Well, I guess that depends on when the Switch 2 comes out, because I know there's a lot of rumors right now about April. No, we didn't really discuss release date, but I've heard rumors that we may get an announcement next week, considering all the things that are going on. Like there's so much swirling in the air right now at the time of this recording.
Yeah, Nintendo has an investor call. I think it's like February 4th or something like that, and I think it has to happen before then. So
I don't think it's going to be next week because they don't want to cannibalize Donkey Kong Country Returns. Like they usually. No, I'm being serious. Like, they don't usually cannibalize their own releases. Like, I mean, even years ago, when Link Between Worlds was about to come out, I was like meeting with Nintendo. I don't even know if it was PR or just some person who worked internally at Nintendo. And they're like, oh yeah, this is like a sequel to A Link to the Past. And I was just like, have you guys considered putting A Link to the Past on 3DS? Because I bet that would be really cool for people who haven't played that game to have this game on modern systems. And they're like, oh, we don't really want to like cannibalize the release of A Link Between Worlds. And I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, this is completely apples and oranges comparison, even though it is like the same series and like same gameplay style. So like,
if anything, people would usually buy the other one too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Nintendo just has a very old school thinking process or thought process of like, oh, we have another release coming out next week. We don't want to like overshadow that. So I think 2 weeks from now is the best bet if I had to guess.
So obviously, this thing comes out in April. You need some games, so a big headliner. The most obvious headliner at this point has to be a 3D Mario game, right? Like, we haven't had something since Mario Odyssey, which was the headliner.
I mean, that's my locked in prediction. If we're gonna spoil a later segment, like it's gonna launch alongside a 3D Mario game, and it's either going to be Odyssey 2 or it's going to be something akin to Bowser's Fury.
Yeah, this also gets into my locked in prediction, but I mean, obviously these are the things that probably would be locked in. My thought is like, you have to launch this thing with Mario Kart 9. Like, I really think that game is the best selling game on Switch, and it's not even a game that launched on Switch. It was a Wii U game. If you're Nintendo, and that is like, you haven't made a new Mario Kart game in like over a decade. Like, at this point, it's wild. You've had a lot of time to do it. You've had a lot of time to see the success of Mario Kart. Like, I think if you want the system selling game that is in every house and everybody has, 3D Mario is great. And I do think that there's like a great chance that we get that. But I actually think like Mario Kart 9 would be the lock, especially if you're like advertising this as like, once again, a portable feature that you can bring to a rooftop party, or whatever, and you have these magnetic Joy-Cons
while I'm playing basketball down.
I really do think that Mario Kart 9 is like, that has to be it. That has to be the launch title, and there will be another one or two, but like, I think that's your system seller. Legitimately, you should bundle that with the console, but like, you don't need to, because it's going to sell so much on its own.
The funniest thing Nintendo could do would do a shot-for-shot remake of the announcement trailer for the Switch 1 for Switch 2.
Absolutely.
Lord knows we can all afford to live in penthouses.
But no, I mean, we can get into that with the predictions. I'll counter that slightly, but I'm mostly in line with you, Gio.
Yeah.
Yep. Mario Kart to me is a pretty good bet. Anything Mario right now, Mario is the hot thing ever since the movie. They want to really lean into Mario as much as they can. Yeah. Third party, obviously we're going to get plenty of different options this time, because everyone missed out last time on the launch of the Switch because they thought it was going to suck. So I would assume this time everybody is going to be ready to go. That's going to be part of why the third party for the Switch 2 is going to be a lot. Like, your game library that you can get it right out the gate is going to be way bigger. There's just no way around it. What do you think is going to drop for the Switch 2, like at launch? Anything big?
I'll save some of my guesses, because I think this gets into some of my like wild picks and whatnot. The thing I will say more generally is that I do think we'll see a lot of third-party support out the gate. I don't necessarily think we'll see a lot of like new game third-party support out the gate. I think we're going to see a lot of ports. Like, I really think we're going to see like, Hi-Fi Rush probably not Hi-Fi Rush, because who owns the rights to Hi-Fi Rush at this point? I don't know.
Crafton,
but
right?
Like, what's that?
Doesn't Crafton have it now?
Yeah,
Crafton
I think Crafton has it now, so maybe they do. But like Pentiment, that's already on Switch. I don't know, stuff like that, right? Like,
of all the games you could have named,
there's
one that's already on Switch.
I know. But I think
Halo Master Chief Collection coming day one to Switch 2.
Yeah, there we go. That would be a good one. No, but I think you'll see like that kind of like PS4 era of like hits come to Switch. I don't know that we'll see like Doom the Dark Ages getting a release on Switch to out the gate. Like, they might do an optimized port at some point. I still don't expect it to be like a day and date Switch releases whatever the new hot game is alongside other consoles. I think it'll be a lot of ports doing the heavy lifting.
I wouldn't be surprised to see one that I was thinking, Elden Ring.
Yeah.
I could see that hitting the Switch too at launch, actually.
The two that immediately came to mind for me were Elden Ring and Metaphor.
Yeah, that could work. Yeah, Elden Ring, I think, is like, I think at least a FromSoft game is there. Whether it's Elden Ring or not, I don't know. Maybe they'll be like, here's Dark Souls 2 remastered or whatever, because Nintendo's weird. But I think Elden Ring would be like that would be your Skyrim of the reveal. Like, the original Switch reveal had Skyrim, and that was like, it can run Skyrim. Oh my God. I think Elden Ring would be the game to do that with for sure.
Here's Bloodborne on the Switch, still running at 30 frames.
Yeah. We did not upgrade it. It looks the same.
Imagine if the announcement trailer was like, Skyrim's back, baby.
Oh my gosh, I would lose it. I would lose it.
Give me, honestly, Silksong. Like, that's the place to reveal Silksong and be like, that's coming. It's April.
I almost wonder if that is what happened, because remember, Xbox was so adamant about like all these games are coming out in the next 12 months. Like, that was like 36 months ago now. Yeah. I'm wondering if there was like a delay in there, and then it got to a point where they were just like, why don't we just wait for like the Switch reveal at this point? All eyes in the industry are going to be on that. Like, let's just announce and have like some sort of exclusive deal with Switch, where it comes to Switch like 3 months before everywhere else, and it's just a huge splash.
Could.
Yeah.
Darn it, there was one I was thinking about, and then that's rumored Oblivion remake.
Oh sure.
Oh,
you could see that hitting the Switch, like
if it could run again. Like I these games that are developed like with PS5 and Series X in mind first. Like I just don't know that the Switch is going to be able to do them right. Like, it's got to be the cross-gen games, unless and like if they are doing Switch optimized ports, I feel like those will come later. Like they'll be months after, which we've seen a lot. I think with like Hogwarts Legacy did a kind of similar thing.
Two that I just thought of that would absolutely rule: Street Fighter 6.
Oh
yes.
Yeah.
It would be so nice to have like a mainline Street Fighter game back,
as long as it's not Nintendo. Like Mortal Kombat 1.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, hopefully it would be better, because the Switch 2 is going to be a lot more powerful, presumably. And then the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy.
Yes.
Like, it's coming to PC, this month or next month? Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is. Remake was on PS4.
Yeah.
Like, let's do it.
Yeah, that would be a great one for sure.
Good calls. Yeah, I do think the industry is much more in the we need to be prepared for Switch 2 comparatively. So I do think the offerings, I think we'll be surprised. I don't know what's going to hit, but I feel like we're going to be surprised at some of the immediate ports that are available, that it's going to be like, oh man, I didn't think that was going to be on the Switch.
Yeah.
Just like I remember the day when they announced The Witcher 3 for the Switch. I was like, how the crap is this going to work on the Switch? That and Kingdom Come Deliverance, the first one. Like when they announced that port for the Switch, it was another one of those where it's like, I don't know how you're doing it, but I totally understand there are 100 million consoles out there you want to sell on, so go ahead. So the kind of final big question when it comes to video games, and we've already kind of talked about this, but is Nintendo going to change up their online, their shop, their multiplayer for the Switch too? Like, I mean, I know we would say they have to, but this is Nintendo we're talking about.
It's hard to be optimistic about this stuff. Like, I feel like it's going to have a lot of the same infrastructure as the Switch. I think like that's something that I hope people are prepared for, is that like Nintendo has built the framework of like what a Nintendo account looks like and what a Switch looks like. My hope is that the eShop is better, that it at least opens would be good. It would be good if it opens and loads. That would be a great start. But hopefully more organized, because any developer sound drives me nuts. Like every developer I've talked to, when we talk about the Switch, they're like, it's the worst. Like, discoverability is terrible on it. Like it's so difficult to get your games seen on Switch. If they're taking feedback from developers behind closed doors at Gamescom last year or whatever, I imagine that had to have come up. Like, a better eShop, please. So I bet we'll see a redesigned eShop. I don't know how much better it'll be, but hopefully a little bit, and hopefully it'll load, and that's it. Their online, I don't expect to change too much. Like, that's just their system. It's like the PS4's online didn't change that much from PS4 to PS5. Xboxes didn't change much. I think the reality is that Nintendo's system is friend codes, and maybe they'll make it a little bit easier to share those and whatnot. And maybe they'll have voice chat in games for real this time.
I would just like voice chat to actually be in games and not on a mobile app on a phone.
Yeah, I think that'll change.
My prediction for what they're going to do with their online, I think that you're right. I think they have to make the eShop better. I don't think they're going to do a whole lot in terms of like online play. Maybe they'll find some way to integrate voice chat into the games themselves. I think they're going to get more aggressive with Switch Online and the expansion pack in particular. I think they're going to start adding more platforms, whether that's GameCube or, find some way to make DS games work. But I also think that they're going to start adding more DLC to that because right now it's like what Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Animal Crossing New Horizons and maybe Splatoon 2.
Yes.
I think those are the three that you get. I think they're going to really lean into that and they're going to be like, all right, well now you get the next expansion for whatever, Mario Kart 9 or Mario, the 3D Mario game. There's going to be like special features that you get if you have like the expansion pack.
I agree with this because I said this when they launched that service where like the smartest service you can do that nobody else is doing is like subscribe to get all of the DLCs for all of our games. Like, and it's perfect.
And then you still sell the game.
Yeah, exactly. Like you'll sell the game and people who have the online service will be like, oh, maybe I should go buy Splatoon 3. So because I'll just get the DLC for free and I hear the DLC is good. Like that would be the smartest thing that they could do is just, hey,
like
our online
Game
service.
Pass.
Yeah. Genuinely, it's like, because Nintendo's not going to give away their games for free, but like the expansions, like people don't even, do people buy them a lot? I don't know the sales data on that stuff, but like, I feel like you could move more games if like you had people signed up for your online service and it was like, yeah, you'll just get the Smash characters or you'll get the Mario Kart tracks and like, there you go. Like the booster pack, I think was part of Switch Online. Or no, was it not?
Booster Course Pass was, yes.
Yes, yeah. Like that was a great idea. Do that for all of your games and make it an add-on service. And I think it becomes really like lucrative at that point. I don't know.
I think those are good calls. I mean, it really boils down to it's all held together by duct tape at this point. So there has to be something done to make it work on the Switch 2, which to me means you have to do some upgrading. Like there's at least some little things that have to be done. So after all that said and done, all of 2025 looked at, all of our thinking on all of this stuff, what do you expect from Nintendo in 2025 as a whole?
I'm going to say like they're going to come out swinging with the Switch 2. I think it's going to be tepid for them until the Switch 2 is 1 revealed and then 2 released. I think that like once, we're going to get like the games like Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. We're going to get Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. Maybe we'll get a Metroid Prime 2-3 drop like you guys had speculated. But then like once the Switch 2 is announced, we might get like one more first party game in between there. But it's going to be like, hey, we're saving up. Everything is going to just be fired in like the 12 months following the launch of this console. And I think that we're going to get it. It's going to be a late spring, early summer release for the Switch 2. And it's going to be like just a rapid fire of like, we're getting a big game every single. I think they're going to try to replicate the Switch model, right? The Switch 1 year 1 model where it's like, all right, at launch, you get like Breath of the Wild, and then a month later, you get Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and then a month later, you get Splatoon 2, and then like, and then the holiday, you get Super Mario Odyssey, and it's just like an onslaught of incredible games that made everybody be like, holy crap, like this new console's been out for like 6 months, and there's already all these amazing games on it. I think they're going to try to replicate that and like have just like they're going to front load a lot of games. I would not be surprised. I think that, my locked in prediction in this next segment is going to be that we're getting a 3D Mario game at launch. But I would also not be surprised if like in that announcement reveal, whatever they do, whether it's like a live streamed like press conference or if it's just like a Nintendo Direct where they're announcing a bunch of stuff alongside of it. I think I would not be surprised if they announced like an Animal Crossing, a Mario Kart, like all for like the first 12 months of this console.
Yeah, I think I agree with pretty much all of that. I think they have to come out swinging. I think like Nintendo is in a position right now where they could own the year. They could be the narrative of the year. If Grand Theft Auto 6 gets delayed into 2026, which is very possible, and I would probably say pretty likely at this point, right? Like it just kind of seems like a thing that might happen. And I think that like Nintendo has a shot at having their like game of the year, right? Where it's like we have a couple of things that are serious contenders in a year that I think is like maybe going to be a little bit lighter on like really heavy hitters. I kind of expect the year in general to be a little bit more like 2021, I think it was, when like there was no clear game of the year front runner, right? And the race was kind of like Deathloop, and like Metroid Dread was in the mix and Ratchet and Clank, right? But there was no like Elden Ring foregone conclusion game. It'll be Grand Theft Auto if that comes out this year, right? Like just realistically. But like if that doesn't happen, I think Nintendo has an opportunity this year to like really push and have like one or two really system selling huge games comes out that feel bigger than they are because it's a new console. Metroid Prime 4 could be that game. I think a 3D Mario game could absolutely be that game. And I really do think that Mario Kart 9, if it is a hit, could genuinely be in the conversation for something like that.
Agreed. Hard for me to really add a whole lot to all of that. I do have kind of one expectation I have. The Switch 2, it will in the first year, in the calendar year, should I say, not the first year, but in the calendar year, it will actually undersell the original Switch.
I would agree with that.
I believe you.
I think that even though they have more consoles that'll be available, I think it'll undersell for the sheer sake that everybody was coming from the Wii U and was like, okay, Nintendo, you've got to wow me. And Nintendo just flat out wowed them. And then with this, it is a lot harder to create that. Not that they can't create the same buzz, but the same spending is going to be a lot tougher. Not just in the fact that we're in a different timeline where it's harder to spend that much money and the stuff is going to be more expensive. But I think that they will undersell, not in a bad way. Obviously, they're still going to sell a lot of them, but it's going to be a lot tougher because especially the cross-gen implications of if I can still get, Metroid Prime 4 on my Switch, there's not a lot of reason for me to, there's not the same reason for me to upgrade comparatively, especially if I have an OLED and it's going to look really nice and pretty on that OLED. And I don't have an OLED option.
Yeah, I fully agree with you there. I said it earlier, but like Steam Deck didn't exist when the Switch came out. It was truly like a fun toy that was like, whoa, like this, you have to check this thing out, and everyone needed to buy it. I don't think Switch 2 has that factor. Like, I don't think it's going to have anything that's like, oh my God, have you seen the Switch? It's going to be like, it's a Switch 2. I think it'll sell very well, like very, very well. But I agree. Like, I don't see it matching the numbers of the Switch in its first year.
Yeah, there was nothing like the way the Switch flew off of shelves.
Yeah. Oh yeah. True phenomenon.
Yeah. So from there, we're going to finish things off and we're going to talk about just some fun predictions that we have. And we're going this way with it. We're going with one locked in prediction that we have. We think this is definitely going to happen. One thing that could happen. And then one thing that is a pipe dream, something that we just reached out into there and we're just trying to manifest this into the atmosphere. Any of you want to go first?
Are we going to go like each of us give our locked in, then each of us give our second tier?
You can give the whole. You can give your whole list.
Okay. I can go first, or you can go first, Gio. Whatever.
No, go for it because I want to be able to escalate mine based off what you said.
Mine are not that crazy. So my locked in one, I've said it a couple times now, is a 3D Mario will launch alongside the Nintendo Switch 2, and the reason for that is, the first year of the Nintendo Switch, we got a 3D Mario alongside the 3D Zelda game. In the time since that year, we've gotten another 3D Zelda game, which presumably takes a lot longer to create than a 3D Mario game. On top of that, the 3D Mario team, they kind of moved off of Odyssey immediately. Odyssey was set up seemingly to get DLC. And I think that they started like iterating and like ideating on like DLC that they could create for Odyssey. Like, oh, we can add more kingdoms, because that's what it seemed like would be perfect for the way that game is structured. And I think they came up with enough good ideas. They were like, let's just do a sequel. And then it got late enough that they were like, let's just do it for Switch 2. And whether it's like in the form of Bowser's Fury or whether it's like in the form of Odyssey, I think that is pretty much a lock. If not launch, I think it's going to be in the first few months.
Yeah. Good guess.
All right. So next up, I think on the announcement trailer, this is one that could happen. This is not locked in. This is like a next tier of riskiness, I guess. I think our good pal Masahiro Sakurai is going to come on screen, and everybody's going to freak out that it's going to be the next Smash Brothers, but it's not. I think it's going to be a Kid Icarus game.
Oh,
He
nice.
loved Uprising, and it never got the due that it deserved. And you needed to have that weird circle pad accessory to really get the experience for it on 3DS. I think it's going to be an all new Kid Icarus game. And then when people are like, "Oh man," like kind of like when Jeff Keighley came out and was like Final Fantasy VII, and then everybody lost their mind. He's like, "No, no, 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 no." But then like a couple segments later, he revealed that there was something with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I think that what will happen after that, whether it's immediately after that or a couple of segments later, we will get like Super Smash Brothers Ultimate Deluxe. And it will be what we have, but like, okay, well, we're adding 10 more characters, 10 more maps, and then like another 2 years of quarterly DLC.
Big one. That's a huge one.
So that's a two-parter in like the involvement of Masahiro Sakurai in the Switch 2 reveal. And then my final one, which I don't know, maybe this isn't as spicy as the Sakurai prediction, but I think that there's going to be some involvement from Xbox. And whether that be bringing in extra games, like you mentioned, Master Chief Collection, I actually don't think that is that crazy to say that, Halo could come to Switch. Like Xbox has shown that they are extremely willing to put games on other systems. Like their entire marketing campaign right now is showing something that is not an Xbox console and saying this is an Xbox. I think that if they can have a presence on Switch, which, if the Switch sales versus the Xbox Series X sales are any indication, like that would benefit them greatly. I think that, getting some extra first party games, ones that maybe you wouldn't expect, like, like a Halo Master Chief Collection, but also I think Xbox cloud gaming is going to be something that will come to Switch. They've been pushing this of like, hey, you can play it on your smart TV, you can play it on your phone. The Switch having an Xbox cloud gaming app would make so much sense, right? Like you can just play them wherever you are in your house. Phil Spencer is a huge fan of handheld gaming. They're prototyping their own handheld device right now, he said, but it's like still like 2 to 4 years off. I think that those are that would be something that would make sense, but it wouldn't be like the most likely announcement.
I like those. I like those a lot. I definitely could see Xbox involvement. I was thinking like I wouldn't be surprised if somehow they figure out a way to get Indiana Jones like running on it, which sounds crazy until you remember that Doom and Doom Eternal run on the Switch, and like that was kind of a crazy feat at the time. Like Bethesda has the sauce for porting. So
one that's an obvious one, I think, that we keep forgetting about: Sea of Thieves.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Sea of Thieves is like in the first year of Switch if there's Xbox involvement, for sure. I got mine. I can say them. So my lock is, like I said, Mario Kart 9. I really, really do think that like if you want this thing to be the biggest thing in the world, Mario Kart 8 is your best-selling game. Truly one of the great selling games of all time. Like at this point, day one, just day one multiplayer game. You want a good multiplayer game on any Nintendo console day one. It's got to be. It's just got to be that. And I think that's your true system seller. I think a 3D Mario comes. I think it could even be both a 3D Mario and a Mario Kart game at launch.
What a launch.
Like, I know that would be maybe a little too crazy.
I mean, we technically got a 3D Mario and a Mario Kart in the same calendar within 6 months of each other. So
yeah. So I think that's the one that I would lock down. I feel pretty confident about that at this point. I just feel like it's such a system seller in the way that like Breath of the Wild was.
And it's one of the few that you don't have to cross-gen it. You can put it in this is only on my console.
Yes, 100%. My number 2 one, and I saved this one when we were talking about third-party games. We talked about like Elden Ring kind of being the like, oh, maybe that'll be the Skyrim of the show. I actually think here's let me throw a curveball that they'll show Baldur's Gate 3 for Switch 2. And that'll be the game that they're doing to like, oh, this is the hardcore gamer game that's on this. And also that's how they'll demo the whatever optical feature they have. That's like a mouse feature for the Switch. I wonder if that's the game where they'll show like, oh, here's somebody like using this in the way that you would do it with a top-down RPG.
Now, would that mean that it would have to be at least as powerful as an Xbox Series S? Because remember, that was the big holdup for Larian putting Baldur's Gate on Xbox, was that there was that like issue of parity between the Series X and the Series S, and Phil Spencer made a special, exception for them where it's like, okay, fine, you can just do 2-player multiplayer on the Series S and 4 on the Series X.
I think they'll like cut the multiplayer, because the thing is, they didn't cut it on Xbox like at first, because Xbox was like,
and that was an Xbox issue.
Features. Yeah. Nintendo's not going to have that issue. They're going to be like, we don't care. However you can get it on this, do it. Nintendo also has a history of bringing games like this to Switch. Like, I think, what was it? Like Larian's last game was like a big Switch
Divinity,
release.
right?
Divinity, that came to Switch, and it was like a big deal. So like Divinity knows how to bring their games to a Nintendo console to begin with. I wouldn't be surprised if they like really lean on them as a big third-party partner, and that's like the hardcore gamer game of like, oh, this runs on Switch, and also it has this like mouse feature that this is great. That's really cool. That's, I think, the third-party showcase game, not Elden Ring. I think it's Baldur's Gate 3.
Nice.
Which maybe sounds like a crazier pick than it is, but I really do believe that that's realistic. And then I keep thinking that this is like a crazy pick, but maybe it's actually like completely sensible at this point, and not crazy at all. So I'll try to add a little bit to it so it doesn't sound as like, obviously, man. Ring Fit Adventure 2 on the trailer and launching within the first 3 months of Switch. I'll add that last part to make it a little bit more spicy. Ring Fit Adventure, people forget, is like a wild system seller. Like that game during COVID, and partially because the right place, right time during COVID, people needed something to do, and that was a great way to do it. But I think that like that is a very popular Nintendo game at this point, and like it is begging for a sequel, and it is begging for Nintendo to have their like flagship fitness game right off the gate, and also to sell another pricey peripheral right off the gate. And that's the kind of thing where you can show it in a launch trailer, like somebody playing that, and that can be your like, we're going to have peripherals for it. Like it's the system's going to support stuff like this. I bet that game comes out within the first 3 months in like the same slot that like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was when that launched, which I think was like a month or two after the Switch. They came out with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. That's what I'll throw out there as my left field one.
And that's a game that will do really well in the Japan audience, which they aim at a lot, especially at launch. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If I really wanted to get crazy, I would say ARMS 2, but I don't think anybody believes that that's a possibility.
What, Legs is not coming out?
Yeah, that's my guess. Legs for the Switch is going to be it.
That's what the optical sensors are for. You can actually scan your legs into the game.
David, do you have predictions? Did you do these?
I do have predictions. So locked in. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom will get performance boost updates. Okay. These will be just like, for instance, Horizon Zero Dawn, where essentially it got the free just random update. You'll just either download the game or put it in your system. You'll get an extra little patch. Boom. You're immediately getting a better version of that game. I think this is going to be the one place where Nintendo does not decide to nickel and dime people for extra money for performance. I know it's not always Nintendo's way with that, but I think that'll be one way that they don't want to hit people up for extra cash. Could happen. I think we get a new Kirby in the launch window. I think they will go ahead and have another Kirby ready to go. I know we've gotten some recent Kirby games, but I don't think it's I don't think those games are so ridiculous that they can't be built decently quickly. And it's been a second since we did the, Forgotten Land, I think was the last real mainline.
Yeah, that was 2022.
Yeah.
I believe that was.
Yeah, because since then we've gotten Dream Buffet, which is not mainline, and we got Return to Dreamland Deluxe, which is a remake.
Yeah.
So I feel like a new Kirby in the launch window, that's a good fit. Like you said, if we're looking at them like just trying to match that cadence, that's a game that helps you match that cadence, and everybody loves Kirby. So that automatically is a good one in there. Pipe Dream. This is my real fun one. And this is why Nintendo definitely needs to upgrade their online, because 2025's Call of Duty is going to arrive at launch. not at Switch's launch, but at Nintendo, at Call of Duty's launch. That gives them a good 6 months down the road. I think, especially since it's a sequel to Black Ops 2, that it just makes a lot of sense, because you're remastering. It sounds like at least half of the maps they were talking about. Half of the maps are going to be remasters. Half the maps are going to be new. If half of the maps you're just doing remasters of, that makes it easy enough to go ahead and make sure these can work on the Switch 2, and then you only have half the effort that you got to put in to do the other side. So
that's a great prediction. I also if it's too early, like if they're still figuring out how to optimize it, I bet at least we get Warzone. Right, like on
I figured Warzone mobile at the least. Like that was actually something I felt like it was almost it makes too much sense for at least Warzone mobile, because mobile actually has a full multiplayer component too. So that makes it actually real easy. But at that point, you would definitely be, since mobile is a free to play, then I feel like they want to. I feel like Activision wants to put a full priced Nintendo game. Activision wants to put a full price game on a console that has a bunch of consoles out there, and that the game never goes down in price.
Yeah.
So good point. Yeah.
Activision wants that money, so they're going to get it by doing 2025 cut. I think it's a bit of a pipe dream, but I can hope.
No, that's a great guess. I hadn't even thought of it, but they have committed to get coming to Switch. It makes sense.
Now, do you think there's any world where we start getting some more PlayStation games on the Switch? Like we saw Lego Horizon Adventures. We've been getting MLB The Show, which I think was more of MLB making that call than Sony. Yeah. But Lego Horizon Adventure, that was a great fit. But it was also this is a first-party Sony franchise coming over to Nintendo.
We actually, in one of the, I think it was the State of PlayStation that we did, somebody actually made a bet on in the predictions of a Ratchet and Clank game coming to the Switch
that
too.
Would be such a perfect fit.
They actually brought up Rift Apart. I'm not sure that would be possible because of the whole SSD conundrum and all that, but you could do a collection very easily.
Yeah.
And there's already rumors that they're diving into old IP. So maybe Sly or something comes back and ends up on the Switch. You never know.
I don't know. I'm so back and forth on it.
Astrobot is like the it's too closely connected to Mario for it to happen.
Yeah. It's such a good thought, and I wish it would happen. My worry is that it doesn't seem like Lego Horizon Adventures really did well from everything we've heard about it, which is not much. And I worry that they're going to be we did that experiment, didn't work. Even though they could try it with a better game, and it probably would. I don't expect PlayStation to play nice on it. I think they're only just starting to play nice with PC, and that's a big thing for them. Nintendo for their big franchises feels like a real stretch.
Yeah, Xbox is much more willing to tear down the walls than PlayStation is right now.
Yeah, and PlayStation just figured out it can make family games. It figured out we can do this as good as Nintendo. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're we can take them down. We can just make 100 Astrobots and take these suckers down. I kind of feel like they're going to get more defensive against Nintendo instead of less. And they bought the Palworld studio, right? Or did they acquire them, or did they just fund them? I can't remember. They have a relationship.
They did sink some money in, I believe.
Yeah. So that's directly antagonistic towards Nintendo. I don't know.
There's a lot of interesting ways that some things will go over the last, it's already insane that you can boot up a console and see a competing console's logo pop up. I don't think you go just 5 years ago. I don't think any of us are thinking that happens.
Yeah.
So this has been a fun chat, gents. I appreciate you stopping by. Everyone, if you liked what you're seeing, what do you think? What are your expectations? What are your predictions? Do you think we did it right? Do you think we did it wrong? Drop what you're thinking in the comments below. And before we get out of here, I would like to make sure that Gio, you and Brian, tell us where people can go and see what you think about Nintendo and other video game things.
Yeah, of course. You can find my writing about video games at digitaltrends.com. And you can follow me. You can follow me on Blue Sky is mostly where I am right now, at Mario Prime. I don't use Twitter anymore. It's gone. But you can hit me up on Blue Sky, and I share a lot of loose posts there about Nintendo.
Yeah, and you can find my podcast, All Things Nintendo, wherever you get your podcasts. It's also on YouTube. And you can follow me on Blue Sky at Brian P. Shea.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for dropping by, for giving us your expert advice, especially since I don't have as much expert advice here. All I know is I need to start saving up some money because there's going to be a lot of it leaving my wallet when Nintendo drops the Switch 2 or whatever it ends up being named. So thank you all for watching. We appreciate you and have a great rest of your day.